Weisler's audiobooks, Dead Air, written and produced by Lee Weisler, read by, well, another computer again. I'm Mr. Weisler, hoping you enjoy this story about a radio DJ's transformation to find grace and true redemption. Thank you for listening. And a special thank you to WKRDradio.com.
Dead Air, a novel by Lee Weisler. Chapter 1, The Morning Voice. The on-air light clicks to life at 5:59 a.m., and Micah Vale leans into the microphone with the unhurried smile people swear they can hear. "Good morning, Central Pennsylvania," he says, voice low and bright at once. "It's Micah on WKRD, the Cove's companion, coffee for your ears. If you're on I-99, blink twice and pretend I saw you." He opens the pot with a bed of steel guitar and crisp drums. He likes a song you can step onto without spilling your travel mug. In the glass beyond the board, the newsroom stirs. A silhouette raises a paper like a sail. The tower outside shoulders the grey sky. In the studio's perpetual evening of soft bulbs and warm wood, Micah can pretend the day belongs to him until he gives it away. His hands move by memory, sliders at thumb and forefinger, a cue button feathered like a prayer bead. He never calls it prayer, he calls it attention. Make the world sound right. "Birthdays first," he says. "Happy 15th to Sophie Vale, who will deny she's related to me if I embarrass her, and happy 40 to Danny in Altoona. Your brother says you still owe him for the carburetor you swore you install in 2004. A laugh ripples through the text line. He reads dedications with the same care he once saved for album liner notes. A name mispronounced at 6:12 a.m. can bruise a day. He is technically just a man talking to a box. But he also knows, down in the rib where fears and hymns live, that on dairy farms and school buses and factory floors his voice fills the seams. He's been the voice for 19 years, since he and Alina were kids with a mattress on the floor and a calendar from a bank they never used. He's done overnights and midday, but mornings fit him. The hush before the town's wake, the permission to be neighborly without being nosy. At 7:05 he runs the giveaway, 2 tickets to a county fair concert, caller 9, name that riff. By the third ring, the phone is a river. "WKRD, your caller 6, he says, and gets a grandmother who cusses softly at herself and then laughs. Caller 8 is a teenager panting from sprinting to the kitchen landline because his cell died overnight. Caller 9 is a man who works nights at the paper mill and sounds like he hasn't spoken to anyone but machines in a week. That small-town Saturday night, the man says. Also my daughter, me, she got the part in the school musical. Then the tickets are hers, Micah says, and the man's exhale is the kind of thank you that can keep a DJ in love with strangers for another year. He reads the school closings in winter and disaster relief numbers when the river lifts its skirt and steps over its banks. He plays first dances and last dances. He says the names of the dead, the way you would carry a glass through a crowded room. The job is to point the mic at people's lives and let them hear themselves sounding good. There are perks, free slices at the pizzeria that does remotes with him. Backstage passes for the bands that still think radio is a mountain you climb. A booth at the 4th of July picnic where he hands plastic flags to kids sticky with lemonade. And there are burdens, small and sweet. The man who calls every Tuesday at 6:10 to ask for the same gospel tune for my wife in case she's listening, and never says her name. The nurse who texts from the hospice wing, "Quiet morning, can you keep it gentle?" At 9:30 the drive time headache lets up. He lays down a spot for a tire shop, reads the copy once straight and once with a wink, because even tires deserve to be heard with a smile. He tapes an interview with a high school robotics team that built a prosthetic hand using a 3D printer older than half its members. He tags a PSA about blood drives. He eats a banana he will not remember. Between songs he glances at the photo taped to the rack. Alina in a sun hat, Ben chewing an ice cube like it wronged him, Sophie rolling her eyes with love. The caption in Alina's handwriting, "Call us before you call your listeners." He calls at 10:05, right on schedule. "Save me a piece of the world," he tells her. "I'm saving you the worst slice," she says, and he can hear the grin even over the dog barking, the dishwasher grinding a thought, the line of a house that contains a life. When the last ad block rolls, he steps into the hall and signs a permission slip a receptionist thrusts at him. Someone wants him to MC a charity 5K to raise money for school lunches. He says yes on reflex. He says yes a lot. It feels like the job to be present in public, and most weeks it is not a mask. Most weeks the being seen warms him like a light. Near noon he records liners for the night jock and kicks off the long stretch of midday automation. the safe harbor where the station can breathe without him. He drives down the hill into town where people say, "Hey, Micah," and then apologize for knowing him like that. He apologizes back and means it. He buys coffee at the Bean because the owner once kept the shop open an extra hour when Micah forgot his wallet and came back with a jar of change and an honest heart. On Saturdays, he does remotes from hardware stores, raffling off bucket hats and $5 gift cards, talking into a mic that feeds a little speaker on a stick while he gazes through the glass at men choosing lawn mowers like spouses. On Sundays, he slips into a back pew with his family, shakes the pastor's hand, sings the big songs, takes the bulletin, folds it small, and loses it by Wednesday in a jean jacket that smells like rain. On weekday afternoons, he is the guy in the grocery store who finally learns the name of the woman at the deli counter because she asks after Alina by name. On Friday nights, he is at Ben's school gym yelling at a referee and clapping. On spring mornings, he laces a shoe for Sophie even though she knows how. It's the last small thing she'll let him do before she's faster than he is. He believes in a general way you can wear without wrinkling it. He has a Bible app he scrolls past like a neighbor's porch light. He is generous with money and careful with time and allergic to silence he doesn't control. When callers ask for prayer, he says, "We're with you," and means we as a civic promise, a lovely chorus of voices. It is enough, he tells himself. It must be. What else could people want? He is here. He is the herest person some mornings in the entire county. At 12:01 p.m., he signs off the board and walks through the lobby past the plaque of sponsors who feel like friends. He nods at the gold 45 framed on the wall. He touches the rim, and for a second, feels the room breathe around him the way the studio does at night, expectant, ready, like a child holding out her hands. The second passes. He pockets a cough drop he doesn't need. He heads home to a house that hums with the kind of noise that has nothing to do with radios, washing machines, homework ballads. Dogs insisting on their right to exist loudly. If home is a station, Alina is the chief engineer. She keeps the signals clean, the clocks synced, the cabinets with exactly one more thing you need than any reasonable person would stock. She greets him with a tea towel over one shoulder and a kiss that tastes like apples. "How were the children of the air?" she asks. "Blessed and feral," he says. "A man at the paper mill won tickets and a grandmother abandoned hope live on the radio." She leans against him for a beat, then hands him a garbage bag and points at the bin that needs carrying to the curb. This, too, is worship in Alina's liturgy, hands that do the thing right now. In the evening, he grills chicken while Ben tells him about a physics lab that went wrong in the right way and Sophie frets over relay order as if troop movements depended on it. The yard breathes cut grass and the neighbor's lilacs. Micah takes pride in burning exactly one thigh per batch and pretending it was planned. He drinks lemonade and says, "Well," and "huh" in a tone that invites more. When the plate is empty, he will rinse it without being asked, but only after Alina clears her throat and stares at him like a gifted student who could try harder. At 10:45, when the house quiets, he wanders to the den where a box of vinyl sits under the window. He flips through sleeves and puts on a record he will take off after a verse because he has once again chosen nostalgia over music. He sits, lets the record spit dust, and texts his producer a suggestion for a segment about unsung heroes in cafeteria kitchens. He opens his Bible app and reads a verse and realizes he has read it the same way he tastes a sauce to see if it needs salt. He pockets his phone, shuts the light, and arranges his face towards sleep. It comes like a forgiving friend. Chapter 2: The Man Behind the Mic. If you know Micah Vale only from the radio, you know a voice that can untie a knot in your morning. If you know him at the grocery store, you know a man who can make asking about deli meats feel like a compliment. If you know him in the bleachers, you know a dad who can clap with his entire forearm. And if you know him at home, you know a man who is excellent at paper towels, somewhat less excellent at remembering subscription passwords, and terrible at leaving any room without turning off a light someone else still needs. He was born 30 miles from the station, son of a machinist and a nurse who took turns sleeping while the other kept the world awake. His father smelled like oil and safety glasses, his mother like coffee and lavender scrubs. He learned early that presents could pay a mortgage. He learned late that presents could be borrowed and not returned. He met Alina in a freshman speech class, where he performed an extemporaneous ode to cassette mixtapes, and she followed with an immaculate 5-minute demonstration on how to jumpstart a car without blowing your face off. He fell in love with her competence, and stayed in love when he learned it did not exist to fix him. They married in a church that smelled like brass polish and lemon oil, ate sheet cake from a pan balanced on a soundboard, and started life with 3 good knives and a broken futon. His first radio job was nights in a station that played 500 songs like a deck of cards you could shuffle at will. if you didn't mind the same boss calling at 2 a.m. to ask why the segways sounded like a bar fight. Micah learned to breathe between commercials, to smile before he said a listener's name, and to step out of the way of a song he could not improve. When Ben was born, Micah held his son for 40 minutes before anyone realized he was still on the phone with a listener whose wife had died that morning, and who could not think of a single human being to call but a man from a radio. When Sophie arrived, she did it like a person late for an appointment. Micah missed the turnoff to the hospital, and Alina delivered a girl in the passenger seat with a grit Micah still considers miraculous. The story is famous at church potlucks. Alina does the telling, Micah does the blushing. God, in Micah's version, is the EMT who climbed into the car at the stoplight with hands steady as city stone. It is a true story. It is not yet a relationship. Weekdays, the alarm yanks him from sleep at 4:07 a.m. He pads through the house like a burglar of his own life, careful with doors and children and dogs. He eats half a granola bar because everyone assures him breakfast is important, and everyone fails to mention that breakfast tastes like wood at 4:18. He drives a truck old enough to count as a friend and parks under light that hums. He touches the tower on his way in the way certain men touch statues of saints. His fans, he calls them listeners because fan feels like a mask he doesn't want to hand them, write him letters with small checks inside for the food bank because he once told a story about a kid who forgot lunch money. They send him photos of first days of school, of new cows, of hands holding diplomas nobody thought would come. They introduce him to broken engines and marriages. He is sober about the limits of his influence, and occasionally drunk on the feeling that he might just be the last public stranger who gets to be trusted by default. Once a month he and Alina host his listener lunch, a drawing for 4 people to meet him at a restaurant that survives on soups and framed football jerseys. He asks questions and shuts up. He has learned that being the man behind the mic means practicing vanishing without making anyone feel abandoned. He is on these days good at it. He comes home full in a way that is not hunger. The weekends, Saturdays are shaped like errands, remotes, and the baseball cap he pretends is not a disguise. He will mow the lawn either too early or too late, and a neighbor will raise an eyebrow either way. He will go to yard sales to find records he already owns because he wants to see the handwriting on the sleeves. He will help Ben measure a trebuchet for physics and pretend he knows what a fulcrum is in the wild. He will drive Sophie to a track meet and drink coffee that has sweated through a paper cup and cheer for other people's children with an ardor that surprises him. It is not harder to love other kids when you love your own. It is easier. Sundays are church. They sit 4 pews from the back, not because they are cool, but because Alina learned long ago that being near the aisle is mercy when one of the kids needs air. Micah sings the big songs. He shakes hands and says, "Good message," and means it, at least in the sense that one should praise what one wants to see more of. He admires the pastor's steady warmth. He admires the old men who pray in sentences that begin in 1973 and find their way home. He admires the women who run the potluck like a quiet army and forgive him for bringing store-bought cookies without announcing it. Prayer for Micah is a door he recognizes. He has knocked once or twice in crisis and felt foolish when nothing immediately opened. He has decided over time that the lobby is enough. God is a light he drives toward in fog with his high beams down. He is beautiful, inevitable, not a person you would call unless your car died on a hill with no cell service and the rain making calendars of your windshield. He loves Alina. This is a verb in their house, not a posture. He cannot always make it past the days static to the signal of her mind, but when he does, he is better for it. She is the one who says when they give more than they planned to the shelter and somehow the numbers still line up. She is the one who says when they keep a Saturday for nothing and watch the dog dream. She does not demand words he cannot find, but she also does not allow absence to masquerade as peace. She is presence thoroughly. If she has a complaint, it is this: don't give the best of your tenderness to the air. She says it without malice. He hears it without changing. Ben is 16 and in that hour of boyhood where the body becomes a question. He is all triceps and calculus and a gentleness Micah recognizes from his mother. The physics teacher calls him a problem anyone would want to have. Micah teaches him to check his oil. Ben teaches him to doubt his certainties with joy. Sophie is 14 and proof that a person can be both flame and scalpel. She runs sprints like she means to catch the future and tell it how to behave. She leaves shoes in doorways like warnings. She tells Micah when a song is dishonest and why. She does not let him get away with false humility. When he apologizes, she decides whether it is real. When it is, she forgives like a queen knighting a subject, lightly and with ceremony. After church, they eat at a diner that refuses to change the clock over the register, because it kept the correct time once for an entire decade, and no one wants to offend its confidence. Micah orders pancakes too often for a man with a family history of sugar. He insists on paying, even when friends fight him for the check. He picks up a tab for a couple who just argued quietly through their eggs without knowing how to stop. He leaves a note on the receipt: "May your next conversation be kinder." He thinks he is being the person God wants in the world. He is not wrong. He is also not finished. On Sunday nights, when the kids are steering toward homework and Alina is laying out the week like a map she knows won't hold, Micah walks the dog to the end of the block where the light gets weird under the big oak. He stands with his hand on the leash and listens to the electric hum of the neighborhood, the soft war between cicadas and passing cars, a TV laugh tracked 2 houses over, the hiss of someone's grill accepting one more sacrifice. He thinks, sometimes, about calling out a thank you to the dark. He does not. He files it with the notes he will sing tomorrow after 6 when the city lets him put words in its mouth. At 10:30 he sets an alarm, kisses Alina's shoulder, answers 3 listener emails, 1 condolence, 1 complaint about the volume of ads, 1 handwritten miracle about a grandson's sobriety, and says out loud to no one, "Okay then." If you could pause him here and coax the truth, he would say he is happy. He would say his life is full. He would say he is grateful. He would not say he is lonely. He would not say that sometimes in the studio the quiet between a caller's goodbye and the start of the next track feels like a cliff. He would not say that the cliff scares him because if he were to fall he would have to ask to be caught, and asking is not his native language. He sleeps, he dreams a ladder of light and a tower humming. He dreams voices calling his name the way people do when they believe you can fix a morning. He dreams of doors. He does not yet knock. Chapter 3: Yellow Light. The storm spends the afternoon building a spine, and by dusk it has 1 black vertebrae marching over the ridge. The tower hums like a living thing at Micah's back as he signs off the late shift. He texts Alina he'll be home in 20 and pockets the phone after seeing only the bubbles of her typing, then nothing. Probably Sophie needed the charger. Probably Ben asked where the blue folder went. Probably the dog has decided thunder is a personal slight. He takes the hill slow. Rain beads, then sheets, turning each street lamp into a luminous dandelion. The wipers can't agree on a rhythm. The road makes that sound wet roads make when they invite and warn at the same time. At the mill intersection, the signal is a lazy metronome, yellow blinking at nobody in particular. He stops, looks left, a river of dark, looks right, a smear of brightness moving too fast for the weather. He leans forward, as if his body could coax the night to be reasonable. On the passenger seat, a t-shirt from the station's giveaway slumps like a sleeping dog. The shirt says "Be kind to your mornings" in a font that wanted to be wise. Micah grins at it, an affectionate eye roll in his mouth. He thinks of pancakes, the way Alina will tilt her head at the pan like a conductor with a favorite orchestra. He thinks of the man from the paper mill who gave his tickets to his daughter named me. He thinks of a sentence to open tomorrow's show. Left, right. The brightness resolves into 2 halos. He takes a breath that intends to become a word. The word is. The breath never finishes becoming. The world does something rooms do when a party ends. A hush that isn't silence, a pause with work to it. There is a sound like rain striking glass 1,000 rooms away. There is a light that is not a light so much as the idea of light trying on different names. There is a feeling in Micah's hands, which are not exactly hands, of letting go of something he didn't know he was holding. Then he's standing. He is not sure he stood up. He is not sure there was a seat to stand from. He is in a hall that makes the word hall feel shy. It has the personality of an airport at dawn and the memory of a sanctuary at night. He can't find the ceiling with his eyes. He can't find the end of the floor with his feet. People move past him with intention and the kind of politeness that does not require noticing him to be real. "Hey," he says, and his voice behaves like a paper airplane. It flies, then stutters, then sinks. He steps into the current and it steps through him. A woman in a cobalt coat adjusts a bag that is not a bag. A man with a case like a guitar checks a watch without hands. Children laugh in a language that might be water if water had consonants. Micah waves, and someone's gaze floats over him, as if he were the idea of a reflection in a window. He tries to anchor himself with objects. A row of counters that do not seem to sell anything. A bank of clocks paused at times that feel familiar in the way the face of a high school acquaintance feels familiar. The clocks do not help. He chooses a direction because directions expect to be chosen and walks. The hall keeps lengthening like conversation that cannot admit it is done. He senses rather than sees doors. He turns his head and the doors become obvious the way stars do once you stop staring at them directly. Oak with iron straps, frosted panes with vines, a battered blue with a dent, a slick rectangle that could belong on a ship meant to forget gravity. Some have plaques he cannot read because his eyes do not want to focus. Some have no names at all, as if the naming is his job. He selects a white door with a brass knob. The knocker is a shepherd's crook, which is either a coincidence or a sentence. He knocks, eyebrows lifted in the old human habit of asking to be liked. Sound returns to him like a courteous echo. The door has no interest in opening. He tries another, and another. One opens a sliver and stops as if embarrassed to have ever moved. One gives him the distinct impression that he is early for whatever he has arrived to. One makes the hair on his arms he no longer feels rise in muscle memory. Okay, he says, and the word does a small, brave job before collapsing. Okay then. In the studio, when a caller drops and the next song refuses to cue, he moves gently, touches only what needs touching, trusts the board to be itself if he is himself. He adopts that body now, even though he does not feel like he has won. He inhales habit, exhales attention. He looks for the sort of flaw people hide in well-made places. There, a seam where wall meets wall without admitting it's a meeting. He presses at the seam with a knuckle of intent. The wall behaves like a good usher, apologetic, efficient, revealing a narrow corridor lit as if light were cautious. Inside it's quiet, not absence of sound quiet, more like the quiet of a hall after a concert when you can hear coats whisper. The corridor widens into a vestibule that is equally ready to be a lobby, a nave, or the first square of a cathedral. The stone floor knows feet. The balcony expects someone to lean and point. Hello, Micah says, because that is what human beings do in rooms that have ideas about them. A small panel on a side wall is stippled with buttons and labels too small to parse. He presses one to prove the panel's reality. Somewhere, faint and far, something rings. He presses another, and the ring happens 2 moments after he expects it, as if time were being polite about its own irregularities. He presses a third and feels foolish. He laughs, because sometimes you have to provide your own laugh track. Is this a? He stops before choosing a noun. What does he have permission to call this? He thinks of Alina. The thought arrives as a presence with temperature. He follows it to a window that is not exactly a window, more a rectangle of light that knows how to be a view and is waiting to be told of what. He imagines his kitchen. He imagines a dog who thinks thunder is personal. He imagines pancakes he was certain would exist tomorrow, and feels the tug in his chest that accompanies changing plans. Am I? He begins, and the sentence drifts, like a balloon deciding whether to land. He wanders the room. Time behaves like a tired child, good for a while and then suddenly done. He dozes without sleeping. He eats by remembering the exact crunch of an apple. He becomes a student of small things, the breath the room takes when he stops performing for it, the way the air hums on a note that would be middle C if notes felt obliged to keep their old names. Once he sees people in another wing through a colonnade, laughing with their whole faces. He jogs toward them and arrives to find they were never there or are still there in a place that does not take his weight. He says, hey, and it is like someone turned down his channel at the board. When he is most tired, he hears a sound, not a footstep exactly, but the universe remembering how to put its weight down. He turns, and a presence steps out from between 2 columns like a man agreeing to be seen. The being is large the way trees are large. You do not measure height, you measure the changes in your own breathing. His face is the kind a person might apprentice their honesty to. The room reorganizes to be about him without sacrificing itself. Hello, Micah Vale, the being says, voice tuned to the room. Do I know you? Micah asks, a ridiculous human question that he cannot help asking. Not yet, the being says, I am meant to know you, I am Ariel. Micah tries a laugh and produces something feathery, like the angel. If that word helps, Ariel says, and manages to make assurance and humor share a coat. Micah gestures at the air, the walls, the idea of ceilings. This is. Some call it a porch, Ariel says, some call it the liminal, it is where the door is near. The door to what? Micah asks before he can help himself. Ariel looks pleased the way a teacher is pleased when a right question arrives. You will see, he says, and tips his head toward a corridor that narrows like an invitation. Micah follows, because following is a muscle humans build in childhood and bear into the places they never practiced for. As they walk, the lights dim and return not in cycles but in courtesies. He smells something that is either lemon oil or his father's aftershave on a Sunday when everyone wore their best. They stop before a white door with a brass knob and a knocker shaped like a shepherd's crook. Micah recognizes it as if recognition were a door of its own. I tried this, he says. I know, Ariel says, and does not make him feel foolish for having tried. Does it? Micah begins, but the question is a question too early in a book. Knock, Ariel says gently. Micah raises the crook and lets it fall. The sound goes into him and returns larger, as if the room had lungs. Somewhere on the far side of the door a decision wakes up and stretches. The door opens a hand's width. Beyond is a room that knows what furniture is the way a child knows what a violin is after seeing one twice. The window is a pale square that wants to be morning. The corners hold their breath. Micah waits for a voice to name things. None arrives. He steps in, the air is shaped like welcome withheld. A feeling he can't categorize gathers at his throat. He thinks of Alina. He thinks, without deciding to think it, of saying thank you in a way that would not be performance. He is surprised to find he does not know how, not quite. Behind him, Ariel waits the way a friend waits at the mouth of a confession. Micah opens his mouth to ask if this is, and then stops, because the sentence would require a noun, and he does not own one yet. Okay, he says to the room and to himself and to the story. Okay. Chapter 4, The Door and the Day. The room holds him like a question. Micah takes 3 steps, and each step is an admission. I am here, I am not elsewhere. I am being shown something that is mine and not yet. A hum lifts faint, like the power in a studio before the board wakes. He turns, expecting a switch or a fuse panel or a friendly gremlin with a clipboard. Instead there is presence. Not entering from the hall, not appearing, simply here as if the air remembered it could be a person. Micah, says a voice that is not loud, and is somehow the standard by which loudness is measured. His name arrives as a gift that already knew what size he wore. He does not fall, because nothing in the room demands theatre from him. He straightens without meaning to, as if someone set a hand along his spine and asked for honesty. The presence is tender and unignorable. It carries the gravity of sun on winter windows, and the patience of someone who has been early for every appointment you missed. You believed I existed, the voice says, no accusation, only architecture. You lived near my porch, you waved from the sidewalk, you told others the house was good and true, and it is, but you did not come in. Micah looks at the room and understands why it sits unfurnished. He has always been good at hosting without admitting hunger. He has stood on thresholds and said lovely things. He has not knocked for love. He begins, and the word tried rises like a reflex. He swallows it, ashamed to hear how small it would sound. I didn't know how. You can learn, the voice says, and the window warms a degree only a musician or a man starving for warmth would notice. A rustle in the corridor reminds him he is not alone. Ariel's face holds the kind of kindness that puts a hand on shame and keeps it from running the room. A second sound enters the space that is not of this room, the papery hush of programs folding, the throat clearing of relatives who distrust microphones, the scrape of pews. It braids itself through the air the way a faint signal threads a storm. Micah startles, not with fear, but with recognition. He has spent most of his adult life listening to rooms through other rooms. He cocks his head, and the room helps him hear. Beloved husband and father, says a voice he knows from the church lectern, a deacon whose tie has never learned to settle straight, did so much for this community. Another voice, Alina's, steady as a plumb line and thinner than he has heard it in years. He loved us, he loved you. A small sound that might be Sophie refusing tears their usual staging. A cough that could be Ben swallowing a sentence he is not ready to speak in public. Is this, Micah asks, and the end of the question is a hand held out to a child across a busy street. It is happening, Ariel says, where time means what you remember it meaning. Micah takes a step toward the window and the pale square obliges, becoming a kind of view. Not an image, something truer, like standing in the same sentence from two sides. The sanctuary his body once knew fills his not body with the ache of wood polish and old carpet. Light drifts through stained glass that used to look sentimental to him, and now looks like a door no one knew was a door. A simple spray of lilies fidgets in conditioned air. His picture sits near a guest book Alina thinks she hates, but signed because hatting too many things in one day is extra work. He sees Alina not because the view is a camera, but because love finds love. She wears the blue dress that has accompanied every graduation and summer wedding for a decade. Today it holds her like resolve. Her hands stand perfectly still in her lap except when they move, and then they move on business, touching Sophie's knee, pressing Ben's shoulder. Her mouth holds its line until someone says goodbye to her face. It flickers, she corrects it. She is a soldier who never applied for rank. Micah tries to speak her name. It catches in a throat he can't swear he brought with him. He wants to run to the aisle and take the paper away from the man reading words that sit awkwardly on his lips. He wants to stand behind Alina so close that his breath moves her hair and say, I'm here. He knows it would do what static does to a signal. He knows this is not how here works now. A woman from church tells a story about how Micah once showed up to MC a bake sale in the rain and stayed to stack chairs until the custodian asked him to go home and rest. The room laughs in relief. The youth pastor says something earnest and misquotes a psalm, and the old men who pray decide to let him live. Someone sings off-key with courage. Someone claps where clapping isn't normal. The sanctuary, which has known more casseroles than confessions, makes room for both. Micah hears his listeners without seeing them. The sound of ordinary grief is its own frequency, cars that will idle too long in the lot, hands that will pause over dish soap and remember, voices that will tell the same anecdote 3 times in 3 stores because telling is a way to carry weight. He recognizes the notes, the woman who writes birthday letters to names on the air, the paper mill man, the grandmother who curses at herself and then laughs. He realizes, with a strange, clean pain, that he was the sound in the seams of their mornings, and that seams are sacred because everything else depends on them. Alina stands. She does not want to. She does it anyway. The microphone's red light is a small, amused echo of the on-air lamp that watched Micah for 19 years. My husband, she says, and the syllables have a tremor she does not apologize for, was very good at talking to strangers in a way that made them feel like friends. The slightest smile, the kind that lets a room sit down. He was also good at leaving wet towels where dry surfaces begged to be. Laughter grateful, she steadies. He loved our children with his whole breath. He loved this town. He believed in God. He did not always, he did not often talk to God. I say that not to scold a man who can't defend himself. She waits for the chuckle. It comes and loosens the line of her jaw, but because I want to tell the truth in a place that is supposed to be about truth. She looks at the stained glass like someone looking out a window for weather. He was good, she says. He was kind, he was busy. Sometimes he mistook being busy near God for being with God. I don't know what God does with that mix. I believe God is kinder than we think and sterner than we want. I believe, her voice falters, then finds itself. I believe love does not waste. Ben approaches the mic with a sheet of paper he won't read. Dad showed up, he says, eyes fixed on some middle distance where boys talk to men they are making. I'm going to show up. He steps away before tears can feel like a performance. Sophie does not speak. She stands and raises a hand as if the track official has lifted a pistol. She holds it there for the length of a silent count, then lowers it and sits. Everyone who knows her understands exactly what she said. Micah presses his hand to the knot window. There is no glass. There is only the difference love knows how to cross and does not always get permission to. He wants to hammer on something with his heart. He wants to say, I hear you. I am hearing you for real. Behind him, in his room, the chair he does not own yet seems willing to be sat in. He turns back as gently as a man leaving the den to take a late call. The voice remains patient. Ariel has moved not at all. I am sorry, Micah says, and the words are not a formality this time. They are a release of a grip he didn't know was hurting him. I kept you at the edge of things. I kept everyone at the edge and called it kindness because I was good at radio. The window warms 2 degrees. The room shifts its weight onto a new foot. The air tastes like after rain when roads decide not to flood after all. Will you be with me now? The voice asks, and the question is so gentle it can carry all the sternness in the world without tipping. And here the room holds another door Micah did not know could open. The voice, still tenderness and truth in one breath, offers him a choice that is both mercy and mission. You may remain, the voice says, and we will begin furnishing what love delayed, or you may go back. If you return, there are 2 paths. Your life as it was, your voice intact, the familiar lights and boards and errands. Or a return marked by loss, your ability to speak taken in the accident's wake. Micah's heart lifts toward Alina and the kids, toward mornings and baseball bleachers and the dog's thunder resentments. He feels his mouth, his instrument, the way a carpenter feels his hands. He understands, suddenly, cleanly, that his old voice kept him safe from the kind of asking that builds relationship. If I go back with speech, he whispers, I will host again, I will hide again. There is no pressure in the presence, only honesty. Then let me go, Micah says, and let me lose what kept me from you. I will learn to speak without speaking. The room consents, the knot window dims. Ariel's eyes hold a pride that fathers know. He wakes in a hospital inside a very small world, a ceiling tile with a fleck that looks like the state of Ohio, a beeping that thinks it's keeping time, Alina's hand already around his. He tries to say her name and a soft wreck of air brushes his lips. The nurses tell him what he already feels. His throat is hurt in ways they can help and in ways they cannot. He writes Alina on a pad. She nods, tears like rain that needed permission. He writes I love you, he writes I'm here. Later, when the doctors say therapies and chances and outcomes, he makes a choice that surprises even the kindest of them. He taps the pad and writes in the careful block letters of a man remaking himself, I choose silence. Alina looks at him for a long time. She takes the pen. Then we will learn a new language, she writes. Added the hospital days. The first week is a geography of tubes and tenderness. ICU lights pretend they know what morning is. A speech therapist teaches him how to swallow again with ice chips and patience. He nods thank you with an entire face. A respiratory tech shows Alina the dance of humidifiers and masks. Alina learns it in one pass, then teaches the night nurse a trick that makes the machine purr. Physical therapy starts with the holy arrogance of sitting up. The room tilts, a strap around his waist keeps him from making a sermon out of falling. He writes on the pad, "Standing is worship," and Alina kisses his forehead like an amen. By week 2 he is walking the hallway with a rolling pole like a skittish companion. He stops at windows and names the clouds in his head. He tries the first exercises for sound, the therapist's fingers on his throat, humming like a shy hive, and writes, "No, not now." The therapist understands, nods, and teaches him breath that belongs to prayer instead of performance. The church brings food and a whiteboard. Ben draws a schedule on it with arrows that make sense to a boy who solves for X like other kids doodle dragons. Sophie writes strong in block letters and then erases it because she doesn't want to tempt heaven. She writes here instead. Alina sleeps in a recliner that hates her. Micah writes go home and she writes no, and the nurses look away to give them their marriage. Insurance forms arrive like weather. A social worker sits with Alina and folds the paperwork into planes they can fly one at a time. A friend from the station brings headphones and a playlist. Micah puts them on and doesn't press play. He wants to listen to what silence says when it thinks it has the room to itself. He writes, "Teach me," and the room, which has been waiting its whole life to be asked, begins. Added coming home. Home discharge day is a parade of checklists and a ramp a neighbor built overnight because he is the kind of man who does the right thing first and explains later. There are rails by the stairs now, and a bell by the bed. Alina refuses to call a bell because it feels like admitting defeat. She calls it the thing we'll never use, and then uses it with a smile the first night because humility keeps the world upright. They learn signs please, thank you, more, pain, water, and invent their own for inside jokes. The dog decides a new rule. Silent people deserve twice as many tail wags. Ben sets reminders for meds and Sophie turns pill bottles into a rainbow because she refuses ugliness to have the last word. Micah's voice is a notebook first, then a tablet with a stylus, then a system of looks and squeezes that Alina understands like a second language she always suspected she would need. He writes a single sentence at the bottom of the first filled notebook, yesterday and now. Alina underlines it, twice. Chapter 5, The Long Yes. Micah returns to church and chooses a seat near the aisle because kindness to others starts with exits that don't make a scene. He asks the pastor, by letter, if he can start a small thing, a Tuesday night table where the Bible is read aloud by anyone who wants to slowly, as if tasting a sauce. He writes the format on a card, read, sit in the silence, one sentence each about what you heard. When it's his turn he taps the card and smiles and points to the line that says silence counts as hearing. People cry without making a mess of it. On Thursdays he stacks chairs after youth group and writes notes for the kids to find under the legs. I prayed for your math test. Your kindness to the new kid was the sermon. Run like joy. Forgive before you're asked. The youth pastor discovers one and decides not to make a speech. He stacks an extra row and carries them quieter. A neighbor drinking himself toward the ditch finds Micah on the porch and sits because silence is a field you can walk into without tripping. They play cards. Once Micah writes on an index card, God isn't embarrassed by you, and slides it across like an ace. The neighbor stops buying bottle-size excuses. They plant tomatoes together and pretend it's just for sauce. At the hospital he visits rooms where words would scare the holy work that's happening. He sits, prays with his hands, and writes a single verse on a card to leave behind. Nurses tuck the cards into charts like contraband that does no harm. A man in county jail writes Micah a letter after hearing about the Tuesday table. Micah replies with 12 pages about Psalm 23 in block letters that look like fence posts, then visits once a month and listens through scratchy phones without saying a word. He keeps a stack of Bibles in the trunk and gives them away like umbrellas in sudden weather. He writes reading plans as treasure maps for people who think Leviticus is a locked gate and shows them the gate opens from the inside. He never scolds the people who say they believe but don't pray. He recognizes the species and refuses to hate his old self. He writes, start with thanks. Then tell God one thing you're ashamed of and one thing you're asking for. Then sit like someone who expects kindness. The station asks him to come back for a segment called Letters from Micah. He agrees on one condition. It airs without his voice, just gentle music and the words on screen for social and a link to the Tuesday table. The segment becomes a quiet runaway. People watch on their lunch breaks and breathe. Someone complains it's not radio if no one talks. The program director says, maybe this is the point. Ben graduates, invents something that makes small machines kinder to the hands that use them, and marries a woman who laughs like full cymbals. Sophie runs at a college that makes her knees smarter and her will softer, then comes home and teaches kids who think speed is the only interesting thing about themselves, that rest can be competitive too. Micah becomes a grandfather by degrees. First to a crib he assembles with the reverence of a man tuning a new board, then to a baby who decides his beard is a mountain, then to two more who name him in a way the family will use forever. He speaks to them the way he speaks to everyone now, with games and eyes and notes. He invents a treasure hunt for the oldest with clues written in block letters that send her to the mailbox, the sycamore, the Bible on the coffee table. The final clue says, "Ask me for the map," and when she does, he hands her a blank page. She looks up, confused, and he taps her heart with one finger. She nods like someone who just learned how doors work. On Saturdays he hosts Grandad Camp in the backyard. Paper airplane races, pancakes, building birdhouses that do not impress birds but do impress small humans with hammers. Before naps he writes a line on a card and they all whisper it together because whispering feels like knowing a secret. "Thank you for making us, teach us to love you back." He never demands piety, he offers invitations like porch lights. He and Alina take long drives with no agenda except the mercy of the same scenery again. They pray with hands held across the console. He writes her letters and tucks them in cookbooks and jacket pockets, and the middle of the bills so she will find love while doing things that could make a person tired. She writes him notes on sticky paper that say "You are my favorite quiet," and the dog still thinks thunder is personal. They do the math of years with gratitude and invent small rituals, like lighting a candle when they pay the mortgage because homes are altars even when paperwork pretends otherwise. Sometimes anxiety gnaws and he misses his old mouth. On those days he goes to the Tower Road and touches the fence and remembers the hum. He writes, "Thank you for taking what kept me safe from you," and the wind edits it to "thank you," which is correct. Rejoin the existing text about his final years and passing. Years pass the way rivers do, measured in the things they carry and the banks they change. Micah grows old the way a good maple does, rings you can't see unless you cut what you will not cut. He laughs without sound and the laughter is not smaller for it. He prays without posture and the prayer is not dimmer. He dies finally, not by rain or metal, but by a quiet that turns toward him like a friend who has been waiting at the edge of the party. He falls asleep with Alina's picture on the nightstand, the dog offended by thunder in some other room, and a pad on his chest that says simply, "Amen." Chapter 6, The Porch and the Names. He is on the porch again. The hall is itself and more. This time he hears everyone. The tide noise that once moved without him now carries names, laughter, welcomes that do not have to pretend not to see him. He speaks a hello, quiet, testing, and the others speak back. The sound arrives to him as if he had always been tuned and only now turned up the volume. He looks to the right and there is a small plaque he did not see before, polished by hands that care. The plaque says Micah. It feels like a joke and a promise. He smiles and walks, thinking he ought to be led to Ariel. He passes door after door, and there are names on all of them. Names he knew and names he didn't know. Hundreds of names. The hallway that used to lengthen out of politeness now gathers him like a host who has been waiting to seat a friend. A figure approaches, not Ariel. Different stature, same ease. The angel's face is the sort of welcome that makes questions relax. "Ariel," Micah asks, pleased that the word behaves like a word again. "Ariel, with Alina right now," the angel says, and the truth lands like a hand on a shoulder that needed it. "Come." He is led the way a son is led into a room he once only peeked into. The familiar door with the shepherd's crook knocker. The brass seems to remember him. The white paint is the precise white of promises kept. And now the scene he first tasted finds its fullness. Wanting is a door, the voice says. "Knock." He turns to the threshold, to the white paint and the brass that is no longer just brass. He lifts the shepherd's crook. It falls small like the sound a child's fist makes on a sturdy table. The sound does not vanish into polite air. It travels. Somewhere inside the walls, a latch nods. The door yields. He steps across, not into furniture, not into a sudden feast, but into presence. The room remains bare and becomes inhabited, the way a note becomes music when breath commits. He feels something like a table set, like a chair warming, like a melody visiting a throat. He sits. He notices with a start of joy that Ariel stands in the doorway now, arrived as promised. The chair holds him because chairs are built to do that for people they want. In the church, a final hymn begins, old and simple, the kind the youth pastor is embarrassed by and will one day love with a fierceness that surprises him. But the view widens. Beside Micah, Alina is here. She turns to him with the face he memorized in youth and loved into its years. God welcomes him with Alina, and the welcome is a sentence that does not need recorder or replay. "Well done, my good and faithful servants." The words do not weigh them down. They make them more buoyant, like air inside lungs that were always meant to be filled. Both of them look out the bright window, time having no meaning, and they see her funeral as clearly as his. They are pleased by their children's faith and love. The voice who is not bound by clocks says, "Now listen." And they do, and their children's children are praying to God in the way a relationship is meant to, not at a distance, not at the edge. You both did good, God says, simple as bread. The room, his house, their house, becomes quiet, very quiet. Not the old hush that once felt like absence, but a quiet that prepares. Not knowing what is happening, he and Alina are then taken by Ariel down a hall they never saw. The corridor opens like a book to a page nobody had dog-eared. They pass a room with thousands of chairs around a table, light like water moving over the backs, and Alina sees 2 chairs with her name and Micah's name. The sight is both invitation and memory of an invitation. When Ariel stops, he points with a nod to a room with both their names. In the sanctuary, Alina closes her eyes on a verse about mercy that follows us. Amen, she says, a word that finally feels like a door in the right wall. In the room, Micah answers, quietly like a man testing a microphone. Amen.